Welcome to the Mommy Mentor Podcast. This parenting bullshit is hard, am I right? From sleepless nights with newborns to sleepless nights with teens, from potty training to sending them off to college, I'm here to get you through it all as your mommy mentor. My name is Kennedy-Heldt, and I'm a registered nurse and a mom of 3. I have professional experience with moms and babies as a postpartum nurse, which keeps the postpartum and newborn experience fresh in my mind. And I have 17 years of parenting experience as well. For information on this podcast and more, go to mommymentorpodcast.com. Parents, grab a cup of whatever you prefer and settle in for the next episode. Hello, Mommy Mentor audience. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Dr. Diane Speier. Am I saying that correctly? Speier? Perfect.
Yes.
And she is very well-rounded in the things that she does. We're here to talk about the fourth trimester, but that is not her limitation. I have the privilege of chatting with her, and she's multifaceted, okay? She is a dedicated advocate for mothers, parents that are navigating the fourth trimester. What is the fourth trimester? Oh, that's the period after you have the baby. People don't realize that's a thing. And then she also has a diverse skill set. She is a therapist, a celebrant, and an energy medicine practitioner. She brings a holistic approach to her work. For over 4 decades, she has been a certified birth educator and doula, offering invaluable support to pregnant and postpartum women. Dr. Speier's unwavering dedication to empowering parents through the challenges of the postpartum period is evident in her groundbreaking app, Digital Doula. And she also has, and she
Digital Doula 2.0.
2.0. And
Yay.
She's written a book also, Life After Birth, a parent's holistic guide for thriving in the fourth trimester. My goodness, we have plenty to chat about. Yes, it's right there. There it is. So this is Dr. Diane Speier, everyone. She is
I'm here.
Amazing. I'm just so excited to talk to you.
And you know what? I just thought, I thought someone whose podcast is called, Mommy Mentor is exactly that audience that I really want to share with, because, it's one of those, it's an old adage, but babies don't come with manuals. And there's so much that's not really understood or known in advance. And we make all these preparations for birth, and we don't realize or pay any attention to what's going to happen after birth. So a number of years ago, I guess, when I started writing the book, which was in 2012, I realized that there was a serious need to kind of fill in the gap there about the need to prepare for what happens after the birth, because it goes on a whole lot longer than the time that we're in labor.
Yes.
So that was really, the premise of writing a book, because there really is a dearth of information, just practical information, and useful information, and understanding the kinds of changes that are going to be taking place. Instead of, people fall into what I call, or somebody else called it, I'm just using the expression, baby shock. And the baby is born, and there's this idea that, well, how come nobody told me it was going to be like this?
Yeah, that is why I have this podcast.
Exactly.
Because no one told me parenting was going to be like this.
That's right. That's right. And I call it the fourth trimester because it's a 3-month period, essentially, right after the baby is born. And during that time, and a significant number of changes are taking place. And it's probably the fastest period of change that goes on, other than the actual birth itself. And if we pay attention to some of what a woman and her partner needs, because I sort of see this as a whole family thing, then maybe I can make a contribution to a smoother and an easier transition into parenthood. That by the end of that fourth trimester, when their baby is 3 months old, and you can sort of see beyond the walls of the home, in terms of going back into the world, maybe joining a class, maybe taking a massage class or sensory class, or any number of things that now mothers can do with their babies. They feel ready to take on the world, and I would hope that that's so. So the subtitle of my book is A Parent's Holistic Guide for Thriving in the fourth trimester. And that goes way beyond surviving, which we all do. We all
Right. We
survive
make
it.
it. Hmm.
But there may have been a lot of sort of personal disruption if we don't support that transition. And the most notable are when women end up having some kind of perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, because they didn't know it was going to be like this. They think they're the only person that this is happening to. That means that maybe there's something wrong with them, or they're doing something wrong, or whatever the thing is. But there is this sense of failure, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of women, for
Yes.
that happening to. And so I want to sort of give them that kind of information that lets them know you're not alone. Lots
Hmm.
of people have this experience. You're part of humanity, and mothers are going through this kind of questioning, challenging, normally challenging experience all over the world.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, and well, fortunately or unfortunately, some cultures do support that kind of 6 month, at least 6 week period
Yes.
after the baby is born.
Yes.
But it tends to be that in English speaking countries, that's not true.
Not the case. Yes, I have noticed that myself. Being a nurse who lives in an inner city, I care for a lot of cultures, and one of the cultures that predominates in my area is the Somali culture. And before COVID, when visitors could come to the hospital and there was no restrictions and all that, the women would just descend upon this mom and her new baby and take care of everything for her.
Right.
And sometimes us Americans can view that as she's lazy and blah blah and get up, get moving, take care of your baby. But that's just because we are uneducated about the fourth trimester and how serious of a transition that is and what can happen and what the consequences are if these women and their partners and the new family is unsupported in the fourth trimester.
Absolutely. I'm
Yes.
completely in agreement with you on that. And, I've been at this so long. I mean, I started running mother and baby, sort of mother support groups back in 1979. And then that sort of morphed into a sort of mother and baby exercise class that I did for 20 years. And so I had a lot of experience of actually working with moms and facilitating their connection, their bonds, showing them things that they could be doing with their babies that really felt meaningful for them. And it was funny because I would bump into people 10 years later and I'm still friends with people I met in that group.
Oh,
And
yes.
so it does create a sense of community,
Right.
which is really, I think, vital. Somebody
Yes.
that you can turn to who's going to help you, not judge you, but who's going to provide some kind of wisdom or just plain useful advice or connect you with something. Because now so much is available on the internet that we can
Yes.
just, but unfortunately, you can get not so good information on the internet as well.
True. True.
And many years ago, when I was an academic health researcher, I was working on a project as a research fellow on how it was called Patients, Professionals, and the Internet, and how people's access to the internet, whether or not that was influencing the experience of patient-doctor consultation. It
Mm.
turned out that at that stage, which was, let's see, 2009 when we finished that, it really wasn't so. There was this whole idea that someone was going to come in with a ream of paper from the printer saying, I read this, but that didn't actually play out in the consultations that I was present for. So it was an interesting thing. So you want to be careful that the information that you get from the internet is reliable.
True. That and finding information on the internet and having that material be your support, and hopefully it's good material and reputable material. That is isolating. Like you said, going to your classes, and not that you have to take a mommy and me class, but somehow get out in the world with your
Mhm.
baby, with people who are
Mhm.
in similar situations as you, because that creates a sense of belonging. You know
Yeah.
that it's huge to know that you're not alone in this and that
Mhm.
everyone is experiencing it, because my very first episode is talking about how I had no idea. I thought I was the only one experiencing this. Then I become a postpartum nurse. it's across the board. Everyone
Mhm,
feels
mhm.
like this. And it took until like 16 years into my parenting career for me to get to that career and know, oh, I'm not alone. This is the real deal. Everyone's experiencing, a variation of what I'm
Mhm,
experiencing.
mhm.
And not just in the baby newborn period. Obviously, it goes on and on and on. Like you said, 10 years
Right,
later, there's ladies who are still friends, and I'm sure they're venting to each other about their 10-year-olds.
right. That's right. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is. And the interesting thing was when I was running these classes regularly, and some people would keep coming, and it would work up until the point where the baby started crawling away. Then it would be a little bit iffy, but so that the mothers that was like had a 6-month-old baby were able to share with the mothers that had a 2 or 3-month-old baby what
Mhm.
worked for them, what didn't work for them, and share their experience. And all of a sudden they became like they knew it. They were the
Right.
expert
Yeah.
just because they were a few months down the road. But that kind of sharing is, I think, fundamental to a sense of community and, as you said, a sense of belonging.
Yes. Yes.
And we need to do more about that. I was just reading an article in the New York Times today about how the U.S. neglects their children. They
Mm.
have a lot of ideas that they don't implement in any kind of policy that would be supportive of families and parenting, whether it's child, leave for or childcare or any variety of those things. It just and Biden did try to do something about that, but it just
Didn't work out.
had a lot of opposition to it. But we don't really do the kind of support for families that they do in other or what they say are peer societies. And I live in the UK now, so for
Yeah, you're
instance,
able to
just
see it.
on leave, I witness it. And so in this country, and they still need to improve what's going on here. But there's parental leave here, and that gives mother and father, a certain 50 weeks. It doesn't mean that they're
Wow.
paid for the full 50 weeks. They're paid for a certain number of 27 weeks, I think. And then they go into a sort of a lower level payment thing. So of course, for a father to make 150 pounds a week isn't going to do it in terms
Right.
of supporting his family, which is probably why some of the fathers don't take the leave that they're
Mm-hmm.
entitled to.
Mm-hmm.
There's still, like my partner's daughter was able to take a year off
Nice.
and bond with her baby and watch those milestones that happened in the first year. And then you compare that to an American mother who may, if she's lucky, get 3 months off, but
Yeah.
who there's a large percentage, maybe 25% of American mothers are going back after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Can't
It's
afford
gross.
not to. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's such a shame. Really.
Yeah, I got lucky for myself in with I mean, I wasn't really lucky, but but the girls were my twins they were my first babies and they were born at 28 weeks.
Mhm.
And I had been basically forced to quit my job because I was, on medical bed rest. I was in the hospital on bed rest. And in those days, there were no virtual jobs. You couldn't do that. That wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
So I was on unemployment. So I was able to stay with them and do the NICU thing. And when they got home, and I took my full 6 months of unemployment that I could get, and I was able to be there with them. And that was, I mean, A, they were preemies, so that was huge. But B, it was so important. And I remember feeling so busy even during that time, even though I wasn't working. And
well,
then
any mother with twins is going to be
oh, well,
busy.
yeah. 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 Mine, I got lucky in this way. They did come home on a schedule. They were in the NICU for 2 months, so the NICU nurses had them lined up and I
Uh,
knew when they were eating. But my son fast forward 5 years from the girls, and I was, now I'm working, I'm in the medical field, I'm a nursing assistant. I worked full duty as a nursing assistant on a heavy floor up until 39 weeks, 4 days, the day before my C-section. Had my C-section, 39 weeks, 5 days, went back to work when my son was how old? 8 weeks old.
yeah.
I
Hmm.
remember, and I joke about this because we have to joke about things because otherwise you're just gonna go crazy. But
Or
like,
cry a lot.
or cry a lot. And I just remember walking down the hallway to the unit every day crying, just crying because why would I be there? I'm supposed to be home. I'm still healing also. I had a
Yeah,
C-section,
yeah.
and like I had my lifting restrictions were lifted and all that stuff. So technically I'm good to go, but I just had a major surgery 2 months ago and my newborn baby's at home. It tore me apart.
Mhm.
I wanted to be a
Yeah.
stay-at-home mom, but we couldn't afford it. And
Mhm.
so you're completely right. The support needs to be there. And you are completely
Right.
right that America, and I laughed about this when you said, if you notice, I smile and kind of like, when you said like the lack of care for the children in the United States. Oh my God, we could go on and have a whole podcast about that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I am very frustrated by it myself, but that's not why we're here. But we do, you're absolutely right. There is so much research, proven evidence that if you support this family, this mother through this fourth trimester, her baby's going to do better. She's going to do better. They're both, and the partnership is going to do better. The
The whole
relationship,
family is gonna
family,
really.
everything's going to go better. And then when she decides, if she decides to go back to work, she will feel like she's bonded with her baby and her baby knows who its mother is, and she won't feel like she's missing out on everything. And she'll also feel physically, mentally, and emotionally ready herself
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
rather than like being forced because of
Right, right.
finances or
Mhm.
insurance or something like that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
there's a lot
yeah.
of families in that position.
It is. And I know it's really true. When I was writing the Digital Doula app, and what I did when the original came out in 2013, and it was pretty much like the first draft of my book, which went through many different revisions, before it was published in 2019. And there was a section in that in which I talk about, the issues around childcare. There's a whole, originally the book had like 6 sections. And the last section was called The Adverse Aftermath of Book. And while I was writing that, the one chapter became two, and two became three, and three
Mm.
became so much was accumulating that my publisher said that's a different book. And then I was sort of like, well, what am I going to do? What's that last chapter going to be? And it ended up being about leave time, parental leave, maternity leave, paternity leave. And I was using it and I was sort of contrasting the American system with the UK system, with Australia, and even a little bit of France, because I had a client in that time who was living there.
Mm,
And I was able to sort of see what the different programs were that were available for parents in terms of taking care of the baby, and also what kind of childcare subsidies were available for them. And the American system, it just really falls short,
it's really
and
bad.
it's unfortunate. So that became like the last chapter of the book. And or it was really called What's Next. And so
Mm,
there was a whole part, going into programs, but there was real section on the whole leave issue that the American system still hasn't been able to come up with an idea for.
no.
And then when I came time to do the app, the app matches the sections of the book. So in that section, I had gender issues and childcare issues, and I was just accumulating material. The app also has sort of just what we call hot topics, or an article, or an idea that I'm sharing. And there's it is something that we do have to pay much more attention to as a society,
For sure.
to provide that support. And then the whole last, the last section of the book is also, or the app rather, is called It Takes a Village, which really goes into the dynamics of providing that kind of support. And support comes in all different shapes and sizes. You can have financial support, you can have social support, you can have emotional support, you can have practical support. And I think that what people have to do, what people really want to be able to ask for that help. But I don't think a lot of people aren't very good about asking for help.
Yeah, it's hard to
And
ask for help.
Yeah. So I always encourage people to really get past that, because you want as much help as you can, because it really isn't meant for us to be raising children as nuclear families. And right now the nuclear family is the minority of the society. So
Right.
what do we, we have this sort of mid 20th century attitude about these things,
Yes.
and why there isn't, why we don't support childcare in the American society, and why we don't provide for parental leave in the American society. These are all ideas about, really are just throwbacks to the 1950s.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Um,
we've been working on it that long.
and I hopefully it doesn't go on any longer than another few years before
Yes.
somebody steps up for our children.
Yes, exactly. Because people view this as a women's issue,
Yeah.
and we all know how some societies feel about women. And we're not, this is not a political podcast, but like just the
Mhm.
repeal of Roe versus Wade,
Exactly.
you make it very
Mhm.
clear that you don't care about women. Like the policies, the lawmakers, it's very obvious that that is not, we're not provided for as much as
And then so the American policymakers, without
yes.
indicating any particular party, those policymakers will see themselves as being superior to a society that
Mhm.
very much keeps them in a second-class citizen kind of role. So they would see themselves as superior to that. But no, it's just
It's the
dressed
same.
up in Western gear. But the
Yes,
attitude
is the
is
same.
that women aren't full-fledged citizens,
Hmm.
and we shouldn't have to support them.
Yes, we're expected to have these babies and mother them like we don't work, but work like we're not a mother. And so, and
I
you
like
have
that
to work.
expression.
I mean, it's true. We're expected to be, 100% and in our motherhood role, and then you're wondering why aren't the kids okay? Well, the fun part about this is all these policies that the policymakers are making that harm women are truly actually harming babies
That's right.
and children and the future generations. And it's not going to
Mhm.
help our country or our world if we're just continuously not setting up the future generations for success.
That's right. And there seems to be a real movement to reverse a lot of the, um, like for instance, women being in the marketplace or the labor force. There's this sort of movement to sort of take away some of that and take away rights, reproductive rights. So although my emphasis in the last 40 odd years has been on childbirth, I've always been an advocate for women's reproductive health.
Of course.
I was part of that women's reproductive health movement back in the 70s. So, and I paid attention to abortion, but the time I left the United States in 1998, no, I wasn't really thinking that there would be any such thing as that Roe versus Wade being repealed,
You would never
or
think.
being, yeah, it never occurred to me. But also the menopausal side of things, I sort of really sort of in terms of a lifespan, women's
Mhm.
reproductive health. And yeah, it is, I think we're getting away from our topic, but
We
nevertheless, it
are.
is, it's sad. It's
It is
sad. And
sad.
I'm here with a mission to, to really make it better. You know,
Yes.
even though there may not be policies that are supportive of you, here's some things that you can do to help yourself feel empowered,
Yes.
and to feel, confident and competent, and all of the things that we want to do. We want to feel competent and confident when we're newborn parent, is sometimes the expression that I use,
Hmm.
because as we started, there's no manual.
No,
It's too
there's,
bad. There's a
I know.
that's a manual now.
There's a manual. There's where you
That's
can
the new
start there.
manual. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
so let's talk about, you talked about how birth is like the quickest, part, the quickest transition. And we've heard a lot about traumatic births in the last, I think that they're coming to a forefront. People are more so acknowledging now birth can be traumatic. And can you share some key insights from your workshops or any other
Mhm.
experiences just to avoid birth trauma and how to prepare the best for that birth?
Yeah, I've done some presentations on this subject, and the workshop also was developed from that. In that, there's how would I express it? I think one of the key things for avoiding a birth trauma or a traumatic birth experience is something called medical consumerism. And most people don't realize that they are, in fact, a medical consumer when they go into the hospital. Because most of we feel out of power unless we're someone like you who works in a hospital. Most people going into a hospital that are not staff
Mm-hmm.
feel out of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so they abdicate. They don't really feel that they can, fight for their rights.
Yes.
And so medical consumer, I mean, when I first became a childbirth educator back in 1978, that was one of the things that was presented to us as important for people to be able to advocate for themselves, because there were things, in those days we were just fighting the escalation of medicalized birth experiences, and what can you do about it? So being a medical consumer means you're going to challenge some of the things that they said. And I had an experience recently where I had to go into the hospital I had hyperparathyroidism,
Mm.
uh, the most obscure endocrine condition you can come up with.
Right.
But I went in for a CAT scan, and I said to the person, when I'd like to see the CAT scan
Mm.
when it's done. And he said, well, I don't know if that's allowed. And I said, well, why wouldn't it be allowed? And
Mm-hmm.
his answer to me was, well, it's medical policy. I said, can you show me where it says that?
They
Now,
can't.
how many people would have that retort? Because they can't, because doesn't exist. But it's a way of getting compliance from patients. It's a way of getting you to agree to do what I want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just an example, but maybe the mom in labor isn't going to do that, but maybe her partner be able to say, can you show me where that is? And if it's really part of the hospital policy, I'll go along with it. But if it's not, then we
Yes.
want to do this.
Yeah.
Part of the medical consumerism is something I call the 4 questions. And the 4 questions are, so this would be the questions you would ask if someone was suggesting that we want to do this for you or to you. And the first question is why?
Mm.
And the second question would be, well, what are the alternatives? And if someone says there's no alternatives, that's a lie, because there's always more than one. There's
Mm-hmm.
always more, there's like 2 sides of the coin, so there's always more than
Yeah, it's
one.
not absolute.
Unfortunately, when they do that, they tend to create fear. So if you don't do this, your baby could die.
Yeah.
Whoa, who's going to fight that one?
Yeah.
But you could come back and say, die of what? Do you know what I mean? It's like, but we're not really geared up for that. But so the third question is, what are the side effects? And then the fourth question, well, what are the cost benefit ratio of this?
Mm-hmm.
And whenever something's being suggested, you have to, I think you really, and it goes against what you feel is right for you, then you really want to be able to, or feel strong enough to challenge that. So that's sort of the medical consumerism thing. I think there's another thing that goes on with trauma. It's the notion of inflammation. And so as a perinatal psychologist, I also understand that there are a variety of theories regarding why people end up having perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And so one of the things is inflammation. And that especially during the third trimester, not the fourth one, but the third one, there are levels of, the level of inflammation, particularly cytokines, is incredibly high. And that is also one of the reasons why some women get very anxious, other women get very depressed. And inflammation as probably the overarching risk of having a traumatic experience comes from that place. But if you teach somebody about inflammation before they have the baby, then they can say, yeah, Diane said that was going to happen, or, I read about that. And then they're like not as alarmed when other people around them start putting the alarms out and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's just a couple of examples. So I think that we need to provide birth preparation, and my workshop supplements fact that these things just come up in birth preparation. So I feel that we need to provide that kind of birth prevention that includes that. And that informs people about mood disorders that are very common. Up to 20% of women could be experiencing that. So be aware. What are the signposts for that? If you're feeling this way and it lasts for a certain period of time, maybe you want to get help. The faster you get help, the faster you feel better, because it's not something that that kills you. It's not something that, unless unfortunately, sometimes it goes to the extreme of suicide, but generally it can be treated. It's easily treated. And then you can get on with the experience of being with your baby and bonding with your baby. And unfortunately, mood disorders can get in the way of that. Let's see. Also, relationship stress. Most people have no idea how having a baby is going to change the nature of their relationship.
Right.
And that's why in the online course that I'm preparing to launch, we are, the very first module is called How to Baby Proof Your Relationship. Because that's a real unknown quantity. People don't talk about it. And I talk about it. I talk about it because I really feel it's important for people to understand that that's going to happen. That doesn't mean the relationship is going off.
Right.
92% of couples are going to experience increased conflict in the first year after a baby is born. Hello, that's just about everybody.
That makes sense.
If that's true, if that's true, then what are we doing to support the relationship during the transition to parenthood? So that's why it became the #1 module in the 8-module online course. So, I mean, birth planning can be done in the way of sort of, rather than as a list of things, maybe as a flow chart.
Right. If this, then this.
Right. And what would be the
alternatives
outcome, and the alternatives. It's exactly right. So these are some of the things that I include in the workshop, because I really want people to understand how in medical consumerism, how the system works. Most people don't know how the system works. So it gives them a little bit of ammunition if they go in and they're being challenged
and they have these questions.
That's right. So don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Exactly.
Get obnoxious asking the questions if need be.
Yes.
So that you feel satisfied. Years ago, I used to have women coming to me. They were not my clients, but they knew about me, and I had a sort of a real wonderful word of mouth back in the day. And so they would call me up and they said, I had the cesarean and I don't know if it was really necessary. And it was like, why are you calling me? But I realized then that women walk away from their births feeling completely unresolved about what happened, why it happened. And then again, they didn't get a chance to answer those 4 questions. What would have been the alternative? What would be the side effects?
Right.
All those kinds of things. And are the pros better than the cons in that situation? So I think those 4 questions, and I have a blog on my website, just on the 4 questions, if you want to kind of look at that further.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm hearing you say education is key, and knowing.
I think so.
Yes, I think so too. I usually inform my patients of what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going to, like, for example, they have this newborn baby and they're, after the first hour of life, they're pretty sleepy, and then they're pretty sleepy for about 24 hours because they just got here. They're tired from the delivery too. And then at that 24-hour mark, the second night phenomenon happens, or the cluster feeding phenomenon happens. And parents, I don't know how many of them have called me like, she is crying so much today. I'm worried there's something wrong with her. Why is she crying so much? So I learned in my nursing career to say, okay, your baby is fantastically quiet right now, and you notice it's been hard to get them even to wake up to eat. Tomorrow, when it's the 24-hour mark, even if you gave birth at 3 a.m., at 24 hours is usually around when this starts, your baby is going to notice its food's not free anymore. And they have to figure this out for themselves. And so they are hungry, they're feeling it, they're going to cry more, they're communicating with you, I need help, I need food. And so telling them that in advance prevents all of that anxiety and fear that comes when the baby is crying nonstop for no reason. It seems no reason, but you're doing all the things and the baby's still crying. It's because they constantly want to eat right now.
Yeah, and I found over the years, once upon a time, there was this idea of early hospital discharge, right? When parents that had a sort of normal spontaneous vaginal delivery, they would just, wanted to go home as quickly as possible. And then the sort of early discharge became the norm.
It is.
And then what happens is people that used to get a little bit of education, as you say, or shown how to breastfeed or how to bathe their baby and things like that might be there for a day and a half, suddenly disappeared. And the women went home without a real understanding of how to take care of their babies.
Yes.
And it's a sad reality, but if you're feeling happy and strong and well supported at home, then going home in that short period of time won't make a difference. But if you're feeling a little bit tentative and not sure, then having that a little bit of guidance and support in the hospital can be really instrumental in getting off to a good start, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. 24 to 36 hours for a stable vaginal birth and 72 hours for a stable C-section. And given I work in a high-risk OB hospital, a lot of the time these people are there for a little bit longer, but it's not because we're trying to support them through this postpartum period. It's because they have high blood pressure or whatever. And so I fully agree with you that that support is so huge. And even that little bit of education that you can get in the hospital, it's very important.
I agree.
And here we are, just bye, see you later, you'll be fine. No.
Yeah, I know that's not true, not necessarily so.
Not necessarily so. All right. And then my next question for Dr. Speier is, could you elaborate on the concept of postpartum wellness? And that's an acronym, WELLNESS, that you cover in your workshops. What are the crucial elements for parents to focus on during this phase for more positive and thriving experience?
Well, the acronym came from, and this is the basis of the 8-module online course as well. That I felt as I was writing the book, this kind of fell into place in terms of what were the keys, and I call it the online course is the 8 keys for thriving in the fourth trimester. But what were the keys that people need to really be aware of so that they can work with that situation, whatever it might be. So the acronym stands for, the W stands for we, which of course was what I was saying before, that's how to baby-proof your
relationship.
Because awareness of the fact that there is relationship stress after a baby is born is important. The second E stands for energy medicine, and I think that's what my USP is with my book, is that I provide tools, simple tools that people can do that can really make a difference in how they feel, or what their energy levels are, or how to increase your milk supply, or how to enhance your bond. So there are in the book, there are each section has an energy medicine piece to it. So understanding how energy medicine can be really helpful in terms of just that time, and the key for energy medicine is that it's something that we can do for ourselves. It doesn't require another person to do it for us, and being able to utilize that is, I find really a great opportunity. Let's put it that way. The first L stands for loving kindness. And that aspect is how we're often so self-critical when we go into that experience without any real knowledge of what to expect. And so what loving kindness does is it allows us to look after ourselves as well as the people around us, as well as the baby partner and all of that. And one of the things that I found in preparing that module was that there's a good deal of research now that says the advantage or the benefits of doing loving kindness is increased personal resources and positive emotions. So in a period of life where it can be so fraught with just those normal challenges, something that will help you to sort of develop those personal resources and feel positive about your experience is worth doing, in my book. The second L stands for less is more. Less is more has to do with the fact that you don't want to be doing all of these things. You don't want to be having lots of visitors. It's very exhausting to do that. You don't necessarily have to have all of the paraphernalia or the top of the line models, because the most important thing that's going to be taking place during that time is getting to know your baby and understanding what the rhythms are and understanding what the cries mean and understanding the way that you are responding to those needs. And if you have all these extraneous things going on around you, it's going to distract from that reality. And then that really is the way for an attachment to really settle in very positively. So that's less is more. The N stands for new normal. And over the years, you can't imagine how many people have said to me, I just want to get back to normal. Except normal changed. Normal is not what it was before. So the ability to embrace that is something that is not an easy thing to do, but it's a real key for reaching a level of satisfaction. Because if you're always sort of looking into the past, oh, well, I was able to do that before, now I can't do that now. And there's that sort of, I just think, let's move forward rather than look back. Or someone once said, let's ride the horse in the direction that it's going,
Yes.
So that's the end. The second E has to do with expectations. And sometimes we go into our experience of parenting with unreal expectations or unhelpful expectations. And that module is about turning those things around or finding helpful expectations and realistic ones. That because I think that depression a lot of the times has to do with the fact that this did not meet their expectations. And all their life they just wanted to be a mother, and wait a minute, what, this is not what I was expecting. So in fact, I bet there's something to that book, that manifesto, what to expect when you're expecting.
Yep.
That's probably an issue in that title.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't know what to expect. It could be a variety of things. That's just a basic.
You have to expect the unexpected. I think that should be the key.
Yeah.
And then the first S stands for self-care. And now that's become something of a buzzword these days in terms of the whole movement for wellness. But not the sort of going to the spa kind of self-care, but creating kind of ways, maybe I won't necessarily call them rituals because that can have a negative connotation, but things that you can do on a regular basis that are taking care of yourself. And that goes back to the whole idea, like if you're in an airplane and the oxygen mask comes down, mother has to put that on first before putting on the child's, because the child, if that mother passes out, what good is it that the child has a mask on? So we really do need to take care of ourselves as new mothers. And that might mean, and that may be leading into the next S, which is support, but sometimes they overlap a little bit. So maybe in the process of taking care of yourself, you ask somebody for help, because maybe you didn't get to take a shower that day. So, and that requires a certain amount of flexibility. So if your normal routine used to be taking a shower in the morning, maybe you're taking a shower in the evening when your partner comes home, or somebody else could be there to hold the baby while you take a shower. Things like that. But the support piece is the most important one, because I do think there has to be, well, maybe a bubble of that allows that support to come in from a variety of sources and resources so that the person feels like they're not doing this on their own. It really does take a village to raise a child and a mother.
Yes.
It's not just the child, it's the mother
Yes.
too.
And I know I have, I mean, I have an episode on this about postpartum visitors, and I know that those people are well-intentioned. Everybody's been so excited about the baby and the pregnancy. They're all anticipating it. We get why they're there and why they want to be there. But that is insanely overwhelming for a new family. So in that episode, I encouraged the parents to set boundaries, but I also encourage the loved ones to really like remember what it was like when you did that. If you don't have kids, if you haven't become a parent, then okay, but imagine how they must feel and try to be supportive. Don't think of yourself. Don't think of your need to see this baby and
Right.
it's my grandchild or it's my daughter and this and that, and none of that matters, because what you're doing is setting the new parents and new family up for lots of stress, because now they're having also arguments on top of it, you know.
I agree with you, and I have always encouraged as well is if someone is coming over, they cannot come empty-handed.
No, I
They
agree.
have to come with some kind of service,
They're either
you
going to
know,
help you or
and
they
if
brought dinner.
somebody, right, if you're gonna bring dinner, or you're gonna help me with the laundry, or you're gonna do some shopping for me, or some of those things, some of those everyday things that need to be taken care of that you're not necessarily able to go out and do, then they're welcome.
Yep.
They can't stay too long.
Yeah. Yep.
But they're welcome. And at least helps the mother be fed. There was something that I think it's in my book as well. The contract for hours is the way I did it. When my fourth child was about to be born, I had this contract for hours, and people could sign up, because one of the things is people really do want to help.
They don't know
And
how is the problem.
exactly, they don't know how, and when they ask you off the cuff, well, what do you want? It was like, I'm not sure.
Yep.
But if you sort of lay it out there, I really would like your help, and they're able to sign up for someone and be very specific about what they're going to do, then it's a win-win situation. The mother is being looked after, but the person who wants to be assisting, it's very concrete for them. They know
Yep.
exactly what they're doing. And so for mine, it was like, someone signed up to take my older kids to after school activities, and someone signed up for shopping for me, and somebody else signed up for bringing over some meals, and and that's a really wonderful way, and that's part of the self-care thing of allowing things. So it covers, none of these are sort of isolated things. Like,
No, it all goes
when
together.
I was speaking at a conference and I had a poster session, it was like I noticed that we, the WE, for the relationship, sort of overlap with support, and the less is more relates to the new normal, and all of these things sort of they sort of gel into something that if you manage to take all care of all those things and address them, then that's going to make that fourth trimester an easier, smoother ride.
Sure. I know I've seen videos on the internet myself of people being like, can you believe Tina? She sent out a list of things that she needs, and she's like, doesn't even want to talk to us. She just wants us to put it on the porch. And I'm like, okay, get over yourself to those people in the video, because yeah, do you want to help this person? Is that your goal? And if that's your goal, it shouldn't matter if you see them or not. And then, like you said, if they need to come with something in hand, and it would be helpful for families to probably make a list of things that you can envision needing help with when your baby comes. You may not know because this is your first baby, but think of the things that you do on a daily basis, maybe, or on a weekly basis, or the chores that you don't think about. The dog needs a walk still, and those types of things. And you're not taking advantage of your family members and your friends by doing this. You're giving them a tool because they want to help you and they don't know how.
Exactly. We're right on the same page with that. It reminds me of one of the bonuses for the or the How to Baby Proof Your Relationship module is something that I call a division of labor. And it's beautifully done, but essentially it creates a table for them to decide what tasks are going to be done by whom.
Mm-hmm.
Because prior to the baby, they may have been a very egalitarian kind of relationship in terms of who does what.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden the baby is born,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes like that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not equal anymore. And the mother, because she's home with the baby, is suddenly taking on all of these extra domestic chores because she's there. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
not right. And that's going to lead to resentment. And the way that it's organized is you have a set of tasks, you write them in, you know, like walking the dog might be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Who's doing that now? Who's going to do that after the baby is born?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then maybe we all added a column for like infant care. So who's going to do this and who's going to do that? And if they have taken the opportunity before the baby is born to work that out, it crystallizes the ideas about what their needs are and how to get them met.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're getting their needs met, then there's less likelihood of resentment building up, because there's can be a lot of resentment for
Yes.
a woman who feels like she's, in terms of gender parity, she's going backwards in terms of her, you know, equal share
Yes.
of what needs to be done. So that's just an example, exactly like the list that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
This is a list of tasks. These are
Yeah.
tasks that need doing, and who's
Yep.
going to do it?
Yeah, doing that in a couple is even a good idea, because there are, like you said, household tasks that you're used to one partner doing this and one partner doing that, and realize after the birth that could shift, and it will shift. And mama is often sitting here stuck in a chair or a bed, breastfeeding or feeding or God knows what,
Mhm.
you know, with the baby. And so they're often kind of a little bit removed from their ability to help in the household because they're focused on this new baby, you know,
Mhm.
and the dad is obviously also focused on the new baby too, but his role is a lot different because he doesn't have breasts. Yeah.
Yes, well, he may have breasts, but they don't
Well,
function quite the same
they
way.
don't lactate, yes. And even if you're not breastfeeding, you're still, you know, very focused on feeding that
Feeding.
baby and all those things. And like you said, they spend the day at home and sleep when the baby sleeps is what people tell you, but then you're
Mhm.
automatically like, no, I can't do that. There's all this stuff to be done. And if my
Mhm.
partner comes home, and this is you telling yourself this, by the way, and it doesn't even have to
Mhm.
be, you know, and it could happen in healthy, wonderful relationships where your partner is amazing and you think, oh God, he's gonna come home and the house is gonna be a mess and he's gonna be like, what did you do all day? So you
Yeah,
don't
and
sleep
that's
when the baby sleeps.
unfortunate. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so that's why it's in the book and it's in the app,
Hmm.
and you know, it is a reality that there becomes a sort of very differentiated level of input, or in terms of what's going on in the house, in
Hmm.
that division of labor. So pay attention to it ahead of time, and
That's
then
smart.
you will be, you know, ready to accommodate each other and understand who's doing what. And then there's no arguments.
Right. Or many less.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Not as much.
Yes.
Maybe there'll only be 85% conflict on that one.
Right, right.
But
Yeah,
we're
maybe not
reducing
92,
it.
just 85.
Right, right.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
And then you also have an online course that's called 8 Keys for Thriving in the Fourth Trimester. Can you highlight a couple of these keys that
Less is
they have
more,
to?
and the new normal, and the play of expectations, all of those things. But people just don't really understand that those are going to rise up. And you know, instead of just having to deal with the adjustment to having a baby, the recovery from having a baby, they're now having to sort of juggle all of these extraneous kinds of things, because they
Mhm.
just weren't, you know, they weren't sort of in that kind of cocoon that they
Right.
need to give themselves. It's only 3 months long, you know, and it may seem like a long time, but it's really not. It will pass like that.
Oh, yes.
And the more that people know what to expect. So I wrote a book and I created an app, but I thought it needs a bigger audience. It needs more people to sort of tune in and say, "Oh, what can I do?" And the value of an online course is that you can just dip in and out. You know, if you have a baby already, you
Hmm.
can dip in. You know, you can listen while you're nursing, or you know, you can get a couple of lessons in. Each lesson only is about 5 minutes long, and you know, most modules have somewhere between 5, 6, 7 lessons
Hmm.
within the module. but it really covers the bases. And then there are lots of, bonuses as well, pretty things that you can, that you can use to understand how to make the most of the situation. So, because so many people have said to me, oh, I wish I would have had this when I was having my baby. I thought, over the last 20 years or so, the experience of childbirth, the over medicalization of that experience leaves a lot of people, like when we started, with a birth trauma. I had a little exhibit in a mind, body, spirit event over the weekend. And a woman came up to me. She saw my retractable banner and talked about being a postpartum specialist. And so she was sort of talking about, the fact that she has a baby, the baby's 9 months old, and, she had a traumatic birth, and the tears started coming down.
Oh.
And so I invited her to sit with me for a little bit. And, because I've been at this for a while, and I wrote a chapter in an anthology on birth trauma, I was able to predict some of the things that she was going to tell me. She had a long prodromal labor, and it went on for 5 days, and people weren't listening to her, and it was a failed induction, and what hospital I could predict so many of the things that she told me. And it was like, yeah, that high level of interventions where obstetrics is taking charge of the experience rather than the mother having an experience, the incidence of women feeling like their birth was traumatic is anywhere from 33% to 45%. Now that may have gotten higher, because that's actually from 2015.
Oh yeah, I would say
a
it's much
major
higher.
review. Yeah, it could be even higher than that now. Now that doesn't mean that they actually get to post-traumatic stress disorder, because about 4 or 5% of women meet the criteria for that. But women walk away saying, I felt the whole thing was so traumatic to me. And that's not a good way to get started.
No.
So that's why that workshop for me, was created, is to try to avoid that, so people can feel like they're in control.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the things that people don't feel like they are. They're not in control.
You're absolutely right. I'm so glad you mentioned those 4 questions that women can ask, because a lot of the time you have no idea. And like you said, unless you're a person who works in the medical system, you do not often feel empowered to say what's what. And people only take, I have a feeling, this is my body. I feel it,
Right.
they only take that so far until it's too late. And then there's not enough focus on the fact that, we get through the birth, the mom, the dad, the baby, the medical providers, we get through it. And there's no acknowledgement of, holy crap, that was hard. Like for you, for me, because I'm sorry, I know that these medical providers also have trauma related to these deliveries
Yes.
that don't go right either.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other subject, but it seems like it's almost like there should be a debriefing, like where and I've seen a debriefing happen a few times, where it was like extremely traumatic, but I've never seen a debriefing happen just when things didn't go as you expect. And I don't mean things didn't go as you expect as in your candles weren't lit and your music wasn't right and your water bath temperature wasn't correct. I'm not talking about that, because I'm talking about, how did this affect you emotionally and physically, mentally, both you and your partner. And I wish that there was more debriefing done in the hospital after the delivery, when things are not, you came in, your water broke, you had a baby,
Right, right. And also it's important to remember that something for the subjective reality of a new mother who feels like she was traumatized. It's very different than the perspective, or the objective perspective of the staff member, the nurse, or the doctor saying, well, it was just another birth as far as they were concerned. But and those things don't match. And sometimes, in terms of when I was doing the research for the chapter I wrote, there was debate about as to the value of a debriefing, because it depends on how it's being done.
It's accurate.
And sometimes that debrief will be very much geared towards a professional rather than the patient. And so here's our perspective, and this is it. And so they're not really listening. So I think really needs to be a conversation about what happened.
Right.
In which the mother's perspective and her subjective reality is taken into account. And that's, I would call that a childbirth review, as opposed to a sort of a debrief, which which definitely comes from a sort of military perspective,
You're
and it
absolutely
tends
right.
to favor the professional side of things. So, childbirth review really, really invites, it's important to invite that person to share their experience, and then sharing their experience and then getting maybe clarification on that, and the professional getting some views that maybe they need to change their, well, if not their attitude, their behavior, in certain circumstances, because it can have this effect.
Exactly.
And so I'm agreeing with you in terms of the notion of
Of
what the
some
birth
sort
has
of a
to do.
thing needs to
Yes,
happen after the
absolutely.
birth. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then that, like that woman I told you about called me 6 months later, that allows them to move forward, to into the whole parenting thing. They're not holding on to this thing that happened, and then,
Right.
it's not resolved, because unresolved stress tends to play out down the road, maybe in depression, or certainly anxiety,
Yes.
and other kinds of issues. One of my logos is called the right start. I will want to get people off to the right start,
Yes.
and always have. It just
Yes.
feels really important.
Right. And for medical professionals that are listening, I know that we see this stuff all the time, every day. You see it over and over again every day. You might see a traumatic birth or something go wrong, or, emergency C-section, crash C-section, etc. You might see like scary stuff all the time at work. It desensitizes you. Please realize that, because this is your job. And I know that you might be able to, like, on some level acknowledge that this is hard for the family, but put yourself in their position. Let them lead the way on how they're feeling and talking. When they talk to you and you ask them how they're feeling, just shut up and listen. Because, yeah, we do get desensitized, and you're darn right. We can easily say, like, oh, it wasn't that bad. You're fine. But in reality, think about this person and her experience. This is not her job. This is not something she does every day. This is
Right.
her birth experience, which is hugely powerful.
Totally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you more about, what is energy medicine?
Okay, so let's talk about energy medicine, because I did a presentation about that this weekend as
Oh,
well.
perfect.
And what it is it addresses the experience of, we are encapsulated in an energy field. So we have this electromagnetic field that surrounds us. Sometimes we call it the aura. And what happens is, if their energies get into a place where they're not flowing the way they should be flowing, then what happens is it can sometimes precipitate into some kind of physical illness, or some kind of an emotional illness, or mental illness. So what energy medicine does is it works with the sort of dynamic infrastructure that is surrounding the person. And it works with, the way that I was trained was with 9 different energy systems. So let's see if I can count them all out. So the first one is meridians, which comes from traditional Chinese medicine. Then there are chakras, that comes from more of an Indian background. And then there is what's called radiant circuits, which is also from traditional Chinese medicine. But radiant circuits are different from the meridians that have very energetic pathways, like the energetic bloodstream of the body. Radiant circuits tend to kind of go like hyperlinks to wherever it's needed in the body. And in the embryo, I found what's interesting is that the very first system to begin to develop are the radiant circuits. Chinese call them strange flows, because they're different from the meridians. And so that's radiant circuits. Then there's the aura. Then there's the Celtic weave, which is like a net that protects the whole aura system and synthesizes all of these 9 systems together. It's like a web, and it contains all of the energy systems. Then there's the electrics, and that's the electrical dimension of all of these systems. And it's also the piece of energy medicine that's easiest to measure in terms of electrics. Hello.
She said she had
Hello.
to make an appearance.
And then what else? There's a basic grid, which I haven't been trained on yet, because that comes in the 4th year, the advanced training, which is essentially like the energetic skeleton of the body. It's very, very deep.
Mm.
And all of the energy systems sort of feed into this deep, deep grid that, can break. So if it's broken, then the person isn't going to heal well or isn't going to be able to thrive.
Mm.
So I don't know if I got all 9 systems. Chances are I didn't, because it always seems that there's one that I've left out. As an energy medicine practitioner, we first work with the organization of the energies to see what's out of whack.
Mm.
And we test the meridians to see if there's anything not happening. Then there are ways of sedating or strengthening them. Working with the whole chakra system, all of the 7 main chakras. And it might be that we're doing something related to electrics. And, so each one of those, whatever the information is evoked from what's called energy testing. It's very similar to applied kinesiology, and that's a muscle testing. Well, this is an energy testing.
Okay.
And so you test each of those, and there are specific tests that you can do for meridians, for chakras, for aura, for Celtic weave. One of the things that I found fascinating when I was doing my training, for instance, about the aura, is that there are 7 layers in the aura. And that's, it's sort of like, and they go from the beginning of your hand,
all the way
right
in.
up to your body. But then there are also what they call bands, and there are 7 concentric bands that go from your toes up to your head. So the aura is also like multi-layered in terms of what's going on in that. And it's also important to know that that everything seems to be with figure 8s. The energy of the system, it tends to form these figure 8s. Occasionally there you find other geometric patterns in there, but mainly figure 8s. And so when I was training, the first year that I did the training, I thought, this is something, these protocols and techniques are so great for people who just had a baby.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's something called the daily energy routine, and it's something that I do every night before I go to bed. And if I forget, I rarely forget now because I pay the price, I don't sleep well. I said the majority of the people get their day started with that. It takes less than 10 minutes, but it actually activates all of these different systems, gets them humming. And so when you're dealing with the low energy during the 4th trimester, this is something that can recharge you. And if you go into the second section of my book, which is called Hormones and the Stress Response, or the dynamic of hormones and the stress response, then energy techniques that they can do to mitigate the level of stress that they're feeling and to balance out the different layers of stress and to understand how that works. In the breastfeeding section, there are things. There's a spleen meridian is considered the mother of meridians. So if you've got spleen flowing well, then that's going to also improve the level of breast milk production. So there are things to do like that. So radiant circuits was something that I discuss in the bonding and attachment section of the book. And that really, what radiant circuits do is they bring joy. And they activate not only your inner joy, but your inner physician, so that you can continue to heal after the session is finished. And then let's see, then there's a whole lot on the relationship section. It was a big section of my book. And I draw on the work of Donna Eden, who is the Eden Energy Medicine, where I was trained, but also her husband, David Feinstein, who was also one of the founders of tapping, the whole sort of tapping thing. So they created a book called Energies of Love. And so whether what I did forget is the 5 rhythms, which is also important. And that's working where the Chinese have 5 elements, whereas other systems have 4. And so in the Chinese elements, you have water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And each one of them has their own stress response. So if you know that your partner has wood, which is anger, but you're, earth and you're anxious, then that's going to impact on how you communicate with each other. So what that does is it offers them ways of shifting the communication in ways that are probably more productive. And one of the things that I did I did this for the actual, this is called Energy Medicine for Postpartum Resilience. And it's a 60-page document. And what I did was I pulled all of the different sections on energy medicine and put it in one document. So it's just, they can read through it, and it's, it's organized into the different sections, so they know what it's about. And
Sure.
Energy medicine is, I think it's the way that health and healing is going to move in the 21st century, because I think we're finding a lot of the typical allopathic strategies aren't necessarily helpful. But the great thing, energy medicine can be something unto itself, but it's a great complement to the medical model.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we can incorporate things into our typical Western medicine and that are supportive. I fully agree.
Yeah.
Thank you for so much for explaining that, because I'm not very familiar with energy medicine. That's so interesting. Definitely going to have to look more into that. Well, I really appreciate you being on the Mommy Mentor podcast, Dr. Speier. It was so amazing to talk to you, and we learned so much. I know that this is going to help the audience for sure. So I really appreciate it. Well, mommies, I hope you got as much knowledge from that episode as I did. Obviously, Dr. Speier is a wealth of knowledge. Her website is dianespeier.com, DianeSpeier.com. I really encourage you to go look at it, because you're definitely missing out if you don't. She has a lot of resources on there for you, and you can even engage with her via her website, via her classes, and you can engage with her throughout the world. She's got virtual classes. So please go take a look at that. And also please take a look at my website or my Instagram. My website's mommymentorpodcast.com. Instagram is mymommymentor. Please just send me a message. Let me know if you have any questions or would like to cover a specific topic in an episode. And please go and like and follow the Mommy Mentor podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Have a good whatever time of day you're listening. Till next time, mommies.